Everybody, welcome to the Prairie Watersheds Climate Program. This is our first information webinar. My name is Duncan Morrison. I am the Executive Director of Manitoba Forage and Grasslands Association. I'll be kicking off our webinar today, and that we will be broadcasting to you from screens from two different locations today. And as such, we'd like to acknowledge that this webinar is being hosted from Winnipeg, Manitoba, situated within Treaty Number 1 territory, the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dene, and Dakota, and is the birthplace of the Métis Nation and the heart of the Métis Nation homeland. In Saskatchewan, our Saskatchewan representatives will be joining this event from their head office in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, situated within Treaty 4 and the traditional homeland of the Métis. Saskatchewan Association of Watersheds has a presence throughout Saskatchewan, including Treaty 2, Treaty 6, and Treaty 5, and acknowledge and honor the many First Nations and Métis who have lived on these lands for millennia. So thank you all for being here. We are still having people join. One bit of housekeeping is I noticed there's a couple of hands up. Because of the size of our event today, we're going to defer those hand raises to the Q&A session, and certainly we will get back to you if we can at that time. Today is a milestone event for us as a project team and represents our largest project communications related event to date with our Prairie Watershed Climate Program. We call it the PWCP. It's funded by AAFC, On-Farm Climate Action Fund, led by Manitoba Association of Watersheds and supported by Saskatchewan Association of Watersheds, Manitoba Forage and Grassland Association, and with key participation from other groups on advisory committees and project-related matters. MA and SAW lead and coordinate the project aspects and delivery agents via the watersheds and their networks across the provinces. MFGA is the communication extension lead on the project, working closely with MA and SAW, and we will manage the project committee to ensure our PWCP key messages are distributed to and shared with our most important audiences, which is all of you. We are hosting this webinar for a maximum of attendance of 500. We had more than 500 sign up, in fact, closer to 600. But we know that not everyone's going to make it, and we're going to make the recording available afterwards. We expect to have crop advisors, agronomists, agrologists, and farmers from Manitoba and Saskatchewan and across all of Canada to learn more today about the PWCP, BMPs, and project details. Again, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on websites of partners and YouTube channels for those that wish to revisit or take in for the first time at that time. The project information hub is located on the Manitoba Association of Watershed websites, although every project partner has links and information available. Today's webinar will feature Dan Cox, Project Management for Manitoba Association of Watersheds, and Lynn Roselle, Project Manager for Saskatchewan Association of Watershed, who will each detail the project in their own province. Our format today includes PowerPoint presentations, a Q&A sessions at key intervals. So for some of those with their hands up, hopefully we can get you through on some of those questions when your interest might come up in a slide, and we will be monitoring them as well. We're expecting quite a few questions, and it's probably realistic for us to assume that we won't be able to get to all of them. However, we are monitoring them and we are reading them, and if we don't get to your question today, we will do our best to respond post-webinar if a follow-up or if your question has not been answered by someone else who asked the same thing. On behalf of project leaders, I'd like to thank and gratefully acknowledge the generosity of ACS-OFCAF funding that has allowed the PWCP to be created in our two prairie provinces. I'd like to acknowledge the efforts of the provinces of Manitoba and Saskatchewan agriculture departments in working with the project leaders to enhance the uptake and awareness of the PWCP in their respective provinces, as well as the government departments that look after the water interests of each project. The leadership of MA should be acknowledged under their board, their executive director, Linda Nickel, and project manager, Dan Cox, as well as the great support from Saskatchewan through SAW and their board, executive director, Bridget Andrews, project manager, Lynn Roselle, and the staff at MA and SAW has been exemplary throughout this whole deal. The engagement of the watershed districts and the other partner groups has been awesome. As we lift off here, the PWCP, the potential it represents at the farm gates and on our prairie ag lands does bode well for farmers in Manitoba and Saskatchewan. And we hope you all maximize your potential roles and actions in helping make it a success. With that, I'd like to introduce Dan Cox, Manitoba Association of Watersheds, PWCP Project Manager, to take us forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Duncan. You guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Andres. Thank you for that great introduction, Duncan, and thank you to MFGA for your support and your hosting of the webinar today. It is really appreciative and everything you've done. My name is Dan Cox, and I'm the project manager for the Manitoba Association of Watersheds. It is incredible to see so many people online here today. We're well over 200 people online. Like Duncan mentioned, we had over 500 people registered for the event. And thankfully, it looks like at least half of those will be on today. It's a beautiful day outside, so not surprising if there's field work being done and busy times that everyone is having. But really appreciate you all logging on today for this information session. Since the official launch of the Prairie Watershed Climate Program on June 23rd, MA and our Saskatchewan partners have been working tirelessly to get us where we are today. And we are incredibly proud to be able to have this webinar with you today to show you and answer questions about the program and help move forward and kick this off. So really appreciative of all the work from our partners at SAW and our staff here at MA for NMFGA and our watershed districts here in Manitoba and in Saskatchewan who have been working tirelessly to get this program ready. It is not a small venture, and we are incredibly proud of where we're at. Our agenda for today is one in which we hope to provide you with all the information that you're looking for. Won't be able to answer every question you have today. If we can't, we will get you the answers shortly. But our goal here today is to have an agenda that gives you all the relevant PWCP information that you're looking for as professionals, as farmers, as in whatever entity you're representing today. And like I said, we're hoping to answer as many questions that you put into the Q&A as we can. So please feel free to put questions in there, and we will answer them at different intervals today, like Duncan mentioned. After the introductions of MA and SAW, we will provide an overview of both the Agricultural Climate Solutions OFCAF program as well as the Prairie Watershed Climate Program. We will get into the eligibility, the general eligibility requirements of PWCP, and then we'll dive into the BMP eligibility and the funding associated with it, which is, I think, what the majority of people are here on to make sure they fully understand all the offerings. I'm sure many of you have read the fact sheets that we have on the MA website and the SAW website and other partners. A lot of that information will be obviously reset here, but those are great information sheets for you to reference. The last item on our list was breakout sessions. We were planning on having some breakout sessions here just to divide up Manitoba, Saskatchewan if there was any specific provincial related questions. Unfortunately, the webinar feature, the webinar setup with Zoom does not allow breakout sessions with the webinar, only with the general meeting. So what we will do at that time is we will continue to answer your questions, and if they're Saskatchewan or Manitoba specific, we will answer them in the general forum here today. But apologies for that. But we'll still have a great event here, answering questions and giving out information. At several points throughout the webinar, we will stop and review the questions in the Q&A and make sure we can answer all your questions. We will stop at the end of each BMP to make sure that we answer questions related to those BMPs. We'll stop at the end of the section on applications and stuff to answer any questions. So we'll have specific spots where we're going to stop throughout the day, throughout the session here to answer questions. And with that, I will get into introducing Ma. I think a lot of you know who Ma is, but just in case anybody who doesn't, from out of province or from in province, Manitoba Association of Watersheds is a nonprofit organization that supports Manitoba's 14 watershed districts in their efforts to protect Manitoba's soil, water, habitat, and climate. Ma offers support in many ways, including assisting with public policy issues, administering joint funding projects like PWCP, and sharing success stories from a communications support perspective. We are guided by the Ma Board of Directors that represent all of the watershed districts throughout the province. And our head office is here in Winnipeg, Manitoba, where we're broadcasting from today. I want to mention there in terms of administering joint funding projects, obviously PWCP is here, what we're here to talk about today, but the Living Labs Eastern Prairies is a project that Ma is currently the lead recipient on with 4 of our watershed districts. Is when we've funded projects such as Lake Winnipeg Basin Program and others in the past, and will continue to going forward as opportunities come. So that's a quick rundown of who Ma is in terms of our representation in Manitoba. I'm now going to toss it over to Lynn Roselle from Saskatchewan Association of Watersheds, and she will give a rundown on who SAW is.
Thank you, Dan. So Dan and I are going to be tag teaming back and forth here a little bit throughout the presentation. My name is Lynn Roselle, as was mentioned earlier, and I'm the program director with the Saskatchewan Association of Watersheds. Welcome, and we're very happy to have you all here today. So for those of you that maybe are new to hearing about the Saskatchewan Associations, or as we like to call ourselves, SAW, because in a world full of organizations, of course, we've got to have acronyms. So SAW is a nonprofit organization that is working towards a vision of protecting and conserving the natural resource of water in Saskatchewan and ensuring that there will be a healthy source water supply of ground and surface water for future generations. We are guided by a board of directors that represent watershed areas throughout the province, and we have a head office now that's located at 817 High Street in Moose Jaw. We also have a satellite office in Swift Current, and we're just in the process of opening up an office in Saskatoon as well. So it's a very exciting time of growth for us here at the Saskatchewan Association of Watersheds. And in addition to our existing programming, which includes Tree for Life, the Water Security Agency Wetland Retention Program, and we also have aquatic invasive mussel monitoring projects. So I was very excited to be delivering the Prairie Watersheds Climate Program in Saskatchewan. Back over to you, Dan.
Thanks, Lynn. I appreciate the introduction to SAW. And now everyone knows both of our organizations, Ma and SAW. If any other organizations that could rhyme with those, we'd be glad to partner with you on future programming. So our next item on our agenda was to give you a rundown on some background on what ACS-OFCAF and the PWC program are. And I know many of you probably already know this in your research. But the Agricultural Climate Solutions Program and the On-Farm Climate Action Fund stream of the Agricultural Climate Solutions is a $200 million 3-year fund that runs from 2021 to 2024, which funds 12 different programs, PWCP being one of them, being the largest one that was awarded across Canada to support farmers in adopting beneficial management practices that store carbon and reduce greenhouse gases, as well as provide other environmental benefits, such as improved biodiversity and soil health. Activities such as outreach, education, and training are supported to promote the adaptation of the BMPs. And I've linked the website there for ACS through AFC Canada. What is PWCP? Well, PWCP is the project that is being led, as we've talked about, by Manitoba Association of Watersheds and delivered by Manitoba's watershed districts and the Saskatchewan Association of Watersheds. It was the recipient of $40 million over 3 years to deliver this program. This program provides up to $40 million in financial support to producers in Manitoba and Saskatchewan to accelerate their adoption and implementation of on-farm beneficial management practices. And yes, we will put the, when we get a chance here, we will put the links in the chat for everyone to see to those websites. But I posted MAW's website on there as well as SAW's website on there. At this moment in time, I don't see any questions. Does anybody have any questions related to what ACS-OFCAF is or what PWCP is? Okay, not seeing any. We will dive into PWCP eligibility, and Lynn will walk through the next couple of slides on eligibility, as well as the section on carbon credits, which I know has been and carbon offsets, which I know has been a topic of conversation with this program for quite a while. But it is settled now, and Lynn will be able to talk about that. So go ahead, Lynn.
Thank you. So in terms of the PWCP eligibility, the overarching guideline for all projects and all BMPs, regardless of whether they're nitrogen management, rotational grazing, or cover cropping, which we'll get into later in the webinar, the project has to be a new practice to the producer or else an expansion of an existing practice onto new acres. The idea behind that is to have more acres that are being farmed put into these BMP practices. So while it doesn't necessarily reward the early adopters, there is the opportunity for some of those people that are already doing some of these practices to apply if they are expanding the practices onto new acres. So that's one of the key pieces, is that it's a new practice to the producer or an expansion to an existing practice. All of the projects must be recommended or endorsed by an agronomist, agrologist, or certified crop advisor. So that's why you, agronomists, agrologists, and CCAs were our target audience today for the webinar, was to introduce you to the program and a little bit about what your role can be in terms of these projects too. Eligible projects will require receipts or invoices dated after February 7th of 2022 and before March 31st of 2024, because that's the program period. February 7th was when the program was approved. So that's why a seemingly arbitrary date is the magic date of beginning to take eligible invoices for. And then producers have until June 30th of 2024 to complete their projects, for the simple reason that we know that not all projects could be completed by the end of March. People aren't often in the field seeding or doing other practices like that by that time. So there is that extension, but those invoices still have to be dated prior to March 31st of 2024. Many of the projects are going to require photo verification. That'll be before and after photos. And that's just to demonstrate that the project was implemented as it was applied for. The projects can't receive funding from any other government funded programs. So you can't stack this with other government funded programs. Like in Saskatchewan, for instance, there's the Farm Stewardship Program or the Farm and Ranch Water Infrastructure Program available. So this program can't be stacked with those types of programs because those are already government funded. And the producer must contribute at least 15% of the total project cost as an in-kind contribution to the project. So overall, the total amount of funding is not going to exceed 85% of the total cost. Producers have to demonstrate that they are inputting some costs as well, whether that's in kind or not. There's a $75,000 cap on all funds received by the producer through the On-Farm Climate Action Fund programs altogether. So that $75,000 is impacting all On-Farm Climate Action Fund programming, whether it's the Prairie Watersheds Climate Program or one of the other approved programs that are eligible through OFCAF. The 13 watershed districts in Manitoba will be delivering the project and assisting producers with PWCP applications in Manitoba. And in Saskatchewan, the Saskatchewan Association of Watersheds has a team of agri-environmental watershed coordinators that are located throughout the province, and they're going to be assisting producers directly with their applications and providing program information. Ready for the next slide, Dan? PWCP and carbon credits, as Dan had mentioned, this has been a topic that has been asked about quite frequently and has been a topic of discussion for many of us over the last few months. So essentially, the take-home message is that the ultimate recipient or the producer can register and seek out voluntary offset credit programs for the carbon credits that are produced from the beneficial management practices that they're implementing, but they cannot use their carbon credits that are generated by the projects on regulatory markets. So to really simplify it even further, a voluntary market is where they can just go and sell carbon credits as their own choice and pick and choose who they're going to sell to. And then the regulatory markets are specific to government markets, hence the regulatory term. So that's kind of how I really simply explain it to people. But certainly if you have questions about those, we're happy to hear those questions as well. Just check the Q&A here.
Thanks, Lynn. Yeah, there's a couple of questions that have come in, and one of the ones that came in, will you be covering which BMPs require photos specifically, or at least how to capture those, that of the nitrogen management BMPs? Yes, not specifically in this specific webinar, but all the delivery agents will be able to provide that information, and we'll be providing that information to the delivery agents. Some, like as you can imagine, some I'm sorry, it'll be difficult to get some photos for some things, right? And for a lot of the projects that are retroactive back to February 7th, you won't be able to get the before picture, and so we are aware of that, and we will be accommodating to that. But all the delivery agents will be able to speak to what's required for each BMP in terms of verification before and after pictures. Lynn, do you want to answer that next one?
Okay, so can an agronomist, a professional agrologist, or a certified crop advisor sign for any of the 3 funding streams? And how is an agronomist different from a professional agrologist? Okay, so I'll see if I can answer this in a nutshell. I'm a professional agrologist myself, and I recall when I was doing my training to become a professional agrologist or a PAG, we did have conversations about agronomist versus agrologist. So agrologists are individuals that are registered and members of their Provincial Institute of Agrologists, which is a overarching regulatory body that is making sure that agrologists are practicing within their scope of practice and following code of ethics. So kind of in a nutshell, an agronomist typically is somebody who works in the agriculture industry, is the simplest way to determine that. Our goal with this program is to make sure that the agronomists, professional agrologists, and certified crop advisors that are advising producers on projects that are within their scope of practice and programs that they are comfortable with and have experience in working with. We're not going to be asking certified crop advisors who work specifically with crops to be writing up rotational grazing plans, because that's outside of their scope of practice. So the goal is to make sure that our professionals are working within their scope of practice and signing off on projects that they're comfortable and experienced in working with. I hope that answers that question.
I thought it did. What is an example of a regulatory carbon market? I don't know, Maddie, if you're typing an answer there, or you probably did. So that one was answered. Is there potential for accepting funding for this program in the years of this program to affect eligibility for carbon programs in future years? No, the intent of this is, if you receive money for the projects that you're doing, it is just for the years that you did the project. So anything after, if you did a project in the first year, say you did cover cropping in the first year and you didn't do it in the second year, the offsets are just for, or the restrictions are just for that year that you accepted money to do the project. And it can't go past the March 31st, 2024, because that's when the program's done and you're not receiving any more funding. If they extend the program and add more money in the future, and you accept more money in the future, there would be similar restrictions, I would assume, at that point. But it's just for the 2 years and no other affecting eligibility in future years in that regard.
Yeah, and that was one thing that I didn't actually read off of the slide, and that was a really good answer there, Dan, is that those restrictions only apply to the fiscal year in which the producer is receiving funding for the regulatory markets. So that's a very important point. Thank you for asking that question.
I got a question regarding how can we make it clear how much each watershed district will receive in each BMP category? Yes, we are working on that, and we'll have those answers to our that question, so our delivery agents are fully aware of what they have for funding for each category. And it's fluid. It will be fluid in terms of seeing how intake is going and ensuring we're maximizing each one of the categories going forward. Lynn, do you want to answer that one about the tech ags and SIA?
Yeah, I was going to say I can take the next one about tech eggs with the SIA. So when I'm talking agrologists, we're looping in the technical agrologists that are members of the SIA as well. So as long as you're a member of the Saskatchewan Institute of Agrologists and you're working within your scope of practice, then you would be eligible to sign off on the projects.
Perfect. Oh, I knew we were going to get this one. What are your thoughts on the government not wanting Urease inhibitors to be part of the activities that can receive funding? The short answer is we don't really have a position on it. It's just it's a fact of the program. They are not in a position to be able to offer funding for those products. I know the Canola Council of Canada is working hard on research and stuff like that. We will provide support for any other entities that and support for trying to get those products on as available funding, but it's just not something that our funder is interested right now and are able to provide funding for. So it's an unfortunate turn of events and when it came to the program, but for lack of a better term, it is what it is, and we will focus on the really positive things that are going forward in this program, and hopefully ESN and PCUs will be there in the future when the federal government is there to help support it. So I don't know, Lynn, if you want to add anything to that, but kind of the political answer, but there's not much we can do about it. Oh, she's gonna be quiet. Okay.
I'm going to be quiet now. This is
Okay,
the first
what
time. There's a first time for everything, Dan.
Will producers be asked to sign any contracts or agreement in respect to carbon? If so, will that be made available in this webinar? The contract that you will sign, that each farmer, and we'll get to this in the application slides as well, probably getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but yes, there will be a section that is worded very similar to what you see on the slide in regards to carbon credits and the restriction on that. So there will be, to receive funding through this program, there will be a contribution agreement that each alternate recipient or producer signs, and that will be a clause inside that agreement in regards to pretty much exactly what you see on the screen. Can CCAs, agrologists, and agronomists apply for projects that they complete for their own farm? We are strongly recommending that no, you get a third party to sign up on your project. Technically, yes, as a professional, you have the capabilities and the knowledge to sign off on your own project. But I think as a good business practice, is a good audit trail, if you could get a third party or a separate CCA or PAG or agrologist to sign off on your project, if you are one, that would be, let's do that, because that's just best practice, and we don't want to have any signs of or any worries about anything in regards to projects being approved in appropriate projects. So please proceed with getting a third party if you are a CCA.
Absolutely, you can still apply to the program,
Yes.
but try to have a third party person be your endorsement or recommendation person. Yes. Apologies
if I read that wrong, but yeah, that's yes, get a third party to sign off on it.
There's another one that says, must an agronomist, PAG, or CCA registered with PWCP before starting to sign off on applications? Must they provide a biography or other documentation, or can they sign as long as they are personally comfortable with doing so? There's actually an an agronomist. What is it being called, Dan?
Professional assessment form.
Professional assessment form. I was going to say attestation, but that was the wrong word. Professional assessment form that the agronomist, agrologist, or CCA is going to complete as part of the project. So that would be included with the application. And that will, I don't know if we're going to, do we cover that during the presentation and bring up a copy? So we'll show everybody a kind of a blank version of what that looks like, so you have a bit of an idea there.
Can you explain voluntary versus regulatory carbon? So I can ask this one. The most recent, we just got some final wording yesterday in regards to the carbon credits, and really it's around whether it's the regulated market is whether it's federal, provincial, or territorially regulated. So if the federal government has a carbon offset program, if the provincial government has a carbon offset program, or if another regional entity, government entity has a carbon offset program, that's a regulated market. The ones that are out there by third parties and companies, those are voluntary markets, or what they would consider voluntary markets. So I hope that that helps answer that question. How is it monitored to prove it a new? I think this will be the last one before we move on. How is it monitored to prove it is a new practice on a farm? So there is no doubt that this project, the landowner will be attesting to the fact that this is a new practice, and they will be attesting to the fact that they're not receiving for other things, that they're not receiving money from other entities to do the same project, stuff like that. You know, the watershed districts and the people in SAW, we're relying on our delivery agents to work with these landowners that they know in their areas to ensure that it is a new practice or an expansion of a practice for that farmer. Is it somewhat an honor system? Yes. But we're also there's lots of checks and balances to ensure, including the agronomist recommendation that this is a new practice going forward for a farmer, or an expansion of a practice going forward. Okay, let's move on.
I think that takes us all through. Yeah, I was going to say, I think that takes us through all the Q&As for now. So we'll keep rolling, and we'll take a break again in a little bit to go through some more Q&As.
That was really good though, everyone. Thank you for all those questions. Those are all really good. So I think we touched on a few of these, but I'll go through the PWCP application process. We will be getting I know a lot of watershed districts and a lot of the water stewardship areas in Saskatchewan have started talking to producers, getting the information, started filling out some forms. We will begin intaking at MAW here the approved applications from the watershed districts and their delivery agents very shortly. That's why one of the reasons we were having this webinar today is because we're very close to being ready to start taking in those applications and approving and moving forward. Producers in Manitoba will apply through their local watershed districts as the delivery agents, and producers in Saskatchewan will apply with the support of one of SAW's agri-environmental watershed coordinators that Lynn mentioned. We also talked about all applications requiring a plan endorsed by an agronomist, agrologist, or a CCA. And applications and projects will require verification before payment in terms of the project being complete. That'll include invoices and receipts, before and after photos, if available. We understand that the before photos for projects that were done back in February, March, April of this year will not be available, and we understand that, and we'll be accommodating to that. And we will also be talking, make sure our delivery agents are fully aware of what we expect or is expected when it comes to after photos for stuff like nitrogen management and other things where it may be not as clear as to what the picture would look like. And each application will have some attestation to it. You'll be fairly straightforward attestations from a producer perspective in terms of attesting that all the information you put in your application is true and correct. And stuff like that. So not arduous. We're trying to keep the application process and the agreement process as straightforward as possible. But that is attestations and saying that you're confirming what you're saying in your application is correct is an important aspect of this as well. As I mentioned before, the program fact sheets can be found at the both Manitoba Association of Watershed webpage and the Saskatchewan Association of Watershed webpage. Once an application is received from the watershed districts, and the watershed districts and the watershed stewards area in Saskatchewan have conditionally approved their applications, and they will be sending those to MAW. Part of this project is all funding has to flow through the lead recipient, which is MA. So the applications that the districts approve will come to us for a final checkoff to make sure all the documentation is in order. Once that is done, and once the project is deemed complete, and once we're happy with that, once we're happy with the application being deemed complete, we will send through the watershed districts, through the delivery agents, a contribution agreement for the landowner to sign. The agreement will be available to the delivery agents to review with each farmer. During the application process, so you know exactly what to expect. Once your application is approved in terms of an agreement, you can take it to get reviewed by legal if you wish. We're trying to keep that contribution agreement as straightforward as possible as well, in terms of getting this program off the ground. So that the application as well as the contribution agreement will be available during the application process for producers. And then once the contribution agreement is signed, the project can be undertaken, or if it's not already completed in the past. And once the project is complete, then payments will be issued based on the agreement and based on the application and the funding available from AAFC. So that's kind of a rundown of the application process. We're trying to keep, like I said, keep it as straightforward as possible, where the producer is in direct contact with their watershed district or their local association in Saskatchewan, and because they know everyone the best, and they know their constituents inside their areas. So try to keep that process as straightforward as possible. We talked about this a little bit, but now you can see it on the form. We tried to keep this form as straightforward as possible. The overarching reason behind this form is to ensure that producers who receive money have talked to somebody, to have talked to a professional. They haven't just received money and gone and done whatever on their field. The reason behind the professional assessment form is to ensure that each producer has talked to a professional about what they want to do, and it's being signed off by a professional. We are not asking for declarations that the project will work. In terms of insurance on that, and from an agrologist perspective, we are asking that to ensure that each farmer has talked to somebody of a professional designation to ensure that their project is the right thing. And that's keeping it as simple as possible, as straightforward as possible. So you can see based on the questions there that it's not an intensive form. You're giving your details as a professional, you're giving the details of the applicant, which BMPs it covers, the activities that it covers, and why you're recommending the activity, and additional comments and attachments if you want to put on there. The delivery agents in Manitoba and Saskatchewan will have this form to provide to applicants, but as PAGs and as CCAs and agronomists, if you want to contact your local watershed district, they can provide the form to you as well through that. So, well, we've got a few more questions on here. Will you be, we'll get to that one when it comes to nitrogen management.
The next one is, does the contribution contract form need to be signed for each fiscal year, or can it cover all 3 years?
The answer is yes, it will need to be. You will need to apply for each fiscal year. So if you're doing cover cropping for this year, you will need to apply for this year. And if you want to do cover cropping again next year, you will need to apply again next year. And it will be we have one area where it becomes where there's a 2-year option when it comes to adding legumes in rotation under nitrogen management, and we'll talk about that. But everything else requires an agreement per fiscal year. That or an application and then an agreement for each fiscal year, because we work on a fiscal year budgets, right? So and whether those change or not. So
next question is, where can we get the professional assessment form?
yes,
And
Yeah, we answer. So you're both all the watershed delivery agents will have those forms to hand out to applicants, as well as to any of you that asked for one. So I don't know, Lynn, you probably got a few requests for that form already. So it is almost complete as well in terms of having some of the attestations on there as well. We are planning on having everything, the finalization of forms next week. So they'll be ready to go. So are producers required to have an environmental farm plan prior to applying? No.
Can the 15% in-kind producer contribution be provided in the form of labor for cross fencing, as an example? And the answer to that one is absolutely yes.
Yep.
Are you anticipating that you will be distributing funds equally or equitably by watershed district? That's a Manitoba question.
So we've had that conversation. We've had those conversations with our watershed districts, and the short answer is yes. If they're able to meet those budgets, if it's spread out equally across all of the watershed districts, that they have said to us that yes, we can meet those budgets, then yes, they will be equally distributed. If there are some that have said no, we won't be able to meet those expectations, we would take less, then we will be able to add more to other watershed districts. So there will be a balancing out of that budget based on who can and cannot meet that equal distribution. To ensure, because this is a use it or lose it program. And so we want to ensure that all the dollars are out there and spent through our delivery agents.
Yes, Dan and I both are very much let's use it and not lose it people. So we're going to do everything we can to get this money into producers' pockets for sure. Is there a list available of ag professionals for each type of BMP, for example, crop advisors or grazing plan advisors? I can tell you that in Saskatchewan, we are working at putting together a list of people that are professionals that are able to do rotational grazing plans. That's an area of need that we've identified, and our staff has been working at putting together a list of those types of professionals. In terms of crop advisors and agrologists, the Saskatchewan Institute of Agrologists has agrologists listed on their website. A lot of your local retailers that you're purchasing product through as a producer have professionals available too. So I don't think we'll have a formal list so much for those for nitrogen management and cover crop BMPs per se, but we have identified a need in Saskatchewan for grazing plan advisors for people. So we're working on that list. Dan, I don't know what you're doing in Manitoba for that.
Very similar. We're working on with our watershed districts on getting lists put together, and a lot of the watershed districts already know who's available in their area. I know when it came to rotational grazing, there's definitely been a reach out. I know the provincial government is offered support there on the rotational grazing side as well for helping farmers with their plans. So there's lots of avenues here, and we are working on lists just like Saskatchewan as well.
And then one last question before we move on. Will there be a deadline to apply for each fiscal year?
We have not set any deadlines. We are because there's a lot of money, we are allowing intake to open up and see how that first intake goes. We do not have any deadlines specifically set. Will we set some deadlines as intakes come in? Yes. We will, as the intake happens and we see where what's popular and what it isn't, and what is being approved, we'll be able to set any deadlines that we might require, or or stop applications at any time. There are certain things that I think require certain BMPs that require probably a specific timeline, and our delivery agents will work with producers when those timelines for putting their applications would be. But we don't have any specific deadlines right now for applications. I don't know, Lynn, if you want to answer any more of that.
Nope, I think you covered it, but we're going to sneak in one more Manitoba related question for you, Dan, while we're on the topic of applications. Some producers are in areas that do not have a watershed district. Do they have any option to be included in this program? What is it that they would have to do?
So great question. Thank you for asking. We've received this question from a number. As soon as we announced the program back in June, we did receive this question from a few people who do not live or their municipality is not part of a watershed district. And the unfortunate answer is, straightforward answer to this is no. The funding is allocated for watershed districts, and the watershed districts are the delivery agents, and the projects must be within the watershed districts. What you can do about it, talk to your municipality, talk to your municipality about joining a watershed district, and what that process entails. But the unfortunate answer to this is no. If you are outside a watershed district, as of right now, the funding is only available to inside watershed districts and projects that are inside the watershed districts. I think the rest of them is the rebate to producers a taxable income. Yes. You'll see on the form when you're going through your application process. Yes, this is considered a farm. Can't remember the exact wording, Lynn, but I believe it's a farm subsidy payment, in which an AGR1 form will have to. We'll be submitting AGR1 forms for each of the all the payments that go out. So yes, it is a taxable income. Okay. Let's see. The other two questions are nitrogen management, which we will get to when we get there. So let's dive into, now that we've talked about eligibility and we've talked about the application process, we'll dive into into what the program is and the BMPs that are eligible. Before I jump into those, though, I wanted to give a huge thank you to the PWCP steering committee, to the regional committees that were set up throughout this process, to all the members, any associations and entities that helped us shape the BMP offerings that are part of this program. It was a long process. There was, the parameters of the fund have certain objectives and requirements, but we have some flexibility, and we work through all of that to try to put the best eligible benefit management practices forward here that meet the program criteria. Admittedly, the eligible BMP list is not and does not meet everything for everybody, and we understand that, and it's just a factor of how the overall funding is set up. We have tried to set it up as much offerings as we can, but and we continue to receive requests daily and of scenarios and different BMPs that is it included or is it not, and we will continue to treat each one of those that come before us and to evaluate each one of those as they come before us. But in the end, the program is the program, and it's going to reach thousands of farmers with funding to integrate new and innovative practices on their farm. But in the end, it won't be everything for everybody, and we understand that. And but the program is of huge value and will provide huge support for farmers across both provinces. So, what are the eligible BMPs? They are covered under three streams on the PWC program. You've probably heard it already. The expanding the adoption of rotational grazing, improving nitrogen management, and increasing adoption of cover cropping across both provinces. And me and Lynn will walk through all three of those to talk about all three. We will start with rotational grazing. And in Manitoba, I'll speak to Manitoba, and then Lynn's going to speak to Saskatchewan, because it is the one program that is slightly different between the two provinces. And the reason behind that is throughout the whole process of determining BMPs and eligibility for the PWCP program, we had to take into account the existing programs that are going on in both our provinces, and ensuring and being cognizant of not harming or being detrimental to those other programs. PWCP is a great program. It's going to be a great program. There are many other great programs across both our provinces. So we are very cognizant when we're designing this to ensure that those other programs were taken into account. And so for Manitoba, there's some great rotational grazing programs out there. One of them is through the Manitoba Habitat and Heritage Corporation, and in conjunction with them and speaking with them, we shaped or designed our rotational grazing BMP in Manitoba around the main aspects of their program. So supporting fencing to support a rotational grazing plan, up to $13,000 per quarter, depending on the fence that type that you're being built, up to a maximum of $50,000. Watering systems to support the rotational grazing plan, up to $2,000 per quarter for stationary water system development and $7,000 per project for mobile water systems. And again, a maximum allowed being $50,000. Improving pasture compositions by seeding legumes such as alfalfa and sainfoin, up to $35 an acre, which is the same, you'll see is the same limit when it comes to cover cropping and legumes under nitrogen management, up to the maximum of $75,000, which is the maximum for any participant across the whole program. And the creation of a grazing management plan, 50% of the cost of the plan, up to a maximum of $400. We have received quite a few questions about what does that plan need to be? And in the end, we need to know where, how, and what you're doing when it comes to your rotational grazing plan. Where you're doing it, that's the land that you're doing it, how you're doing it in terms of how many paddocks and stuff you're setting up in your plan, and where, a map showing where any infrastructure that you're going to be installed is going to be going. And that's it. We're trying to keep it, again, the theme of a lot of our things is keeping it as straightforward as possible. So your grazing management plan needs to tell us where, how, and where, how, and what. I screwed that up. Keeping it straightforward when it comes to the rotational grazing plan. And that is the gist of like I said, we tried to mirror or to be as close to the Manitoba Habitat Heritage Corporation rotational grazing program as we could to keep some consistency for farmers. But it has some differences, as you'll see, as is seen. And I'll toss it over to Lynn to talk about Saskatchewan's grazing plans.
So we do have, a few differences between Saskatchewan and Manitoba on the rotational grazing side of things. But again, still that overarching principle of it's a new practice and on new acres, expanding on an existing practice. So in Saskatchewan, we're looking at fencing to support a rotational grazing plan and paying that on a flat rate per acre for impacted acres of $10. Per acre that's impacted up to a maximum of $10,000. A producer does need to have a grazing plan and provide that as part of that application in order to apply under that specific BMP. Then there's also watering systems to support rotational grazing plans. And again, they need to provide a copy of the rotational grazing plan with that application to demonstrate how that watering system is required and going to be used throughout the rotational grazing plan. And that's up to $5,000 per remote water system to a maximum of 2 systems. So a maximum essentially of $10,000. Those water systems have to be a renewable energy type fueled product. That's what I'm trying to say, either solar or wind powered. And then there's also funding available to help produce those grazing management plans for producers to be able to apply for those other 2 for the fencing and the water systems. And the creation of a grazing management plan has funding available of 50% of the cost up to a maximum of $400 back to the producer. And then we also have an improving pasture composition BMP in Saskatchewan, which would include seeding legumes such as alfalfa and also includes sainfoin at $35 per acre up to a maximum of $75,000, which again is the overarching program cap of the On-Farm Climate Action Fund. Under the water systems, if a producer is already eligible for the Farm and Ranch Water Infrastructure Program for that project, then they would not be eligible through the Prairie Watershed Climate Program. We don't want to be in any kind of competition with the Farm and Ranch Water Infrastructure Program at all. So if it is a system that's already eligible for WIP, then it would not be something that you could apply for through the PWCP. But where you could apply through the PWCP is for a water system that maybe isn't eligible for FRWIP if it's on an existing dugout, because my understanding is that through the Farm and Ranch Water Infrastructure Program, it needs to be on a new dugout. So an example of something that would fit here is if it's part of your grazing plan and it's going to go on an existing dugout, then that's something that could be considered under our program. Oh, you're on mute, Dan.
Got it. Thanks, Len. We'll stop here for a second to talk about and answer some questions here. Is brushing for cross fencing an eligible expense? I believe we've had this question before, Len. I'm trying to remember how we answered it. I believe the answer is no, it's not an eligible expense, but it is eligible in terms of your in-kind contribution, right? That's part of putting in the fencing and the installation. So it's part of your, can be part of your 15% or more in-kind contribution.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and in Saskatchewan, being that we're paying per impacted acre, it really is for the part that's in the grazing plan and for the fencing. So yeah, but that definitely would be part of the in-kind for sure.
Okay.
Next question, would Ducks Unlimited land be eligible?
That's it. Thanks for that question, Penny. I don't want to misspeak here. I know when it comes to Crown land and other properties, as long as you the activities you are doing with PWCP are not offside on any of the agreements you may have with other entities, I think that's the most important part. This program and this funding cannot has to be in line with whatever requirements you have in your existing agreements with any other entities, whether it's Crown land or Ducks or any other caveats you might have on your property. So I'll get some more follow-up on that, but I think that's probably the most straightforward answer in terms of not being offside on any agreement you currently have with a third party.
And then there's a Manitoba question. Will small dugouts to support rotational grazing be considered a stationary water system in Manitoba?
I'll get back to you on that one, Sean. I believe the answer is no, but we'll get back to you on that one.
And then is the $75,000 cap per fiscal? Oh, it ran away. Somebody else answered it while I was reading it. Sorry.
The answer to that is it's the entirety of the program, the 2 years.
Yes, and then here's a Saskatchewan question. So are the Saskatchewan grazing plan requirements the same as Manitoba? Where, how, what, or does it require any additional information? We have been working on kind of coming up with a quick checklist for grazing plans that internally that we would be able to let people know, but the bones of where, what, and how it's going to be used would definitely be in there. We might look a little bit more for stocking rate and also, you know, what kind of pasture is it? Is it native? Is it tame? What's the composition? Just to make sure that you're within your proper stocking rate. But being that it's a plan that's been created by an agronomist or an agrologist that's got experience with that, then we would defer to them for sure.
Perfect. Are the Saskatchewan? Oh no, here we go. Our staff keeps answering these questions so fast.
I know.
They keep going up.
I start reading them and I'm like, oh, it's gone.
I think there's a Saskatchewan there at the bottom there for you. What if a producer isn't eligible for FRWIP, but the project is?
Oh, I didn't see that one. Okay, so what if a producer isn't eligible for FRWIP, but the project is? For example, the producer does not meet the gross farm income requirement. Ah, that's a good question. So then technically the producer, then the project technically is not eligible for FRWIP because the producer cannot apply. So as long as there's a grazing plan that supports the use of that water system, we don't have the same income requirement through PWCP. So our requirement is that it fits the grazing plan and that there is a grazing plan that's available. So if it meets those criteria and it's a new practice on new acres, then it would be eligible to apply for PWCP. There's a Manitoba question about cover crops. Do you want to leave that until we get into cover crops, Dan?
It's a fairly straightforward answer. The answer is yes. If you do cover cropping in year one and you want to do on the same acres in year two, that is okay. The goal is to be you're new on year one. If you're going to do the same acres in year two, that is eligible.
Mm-hmm. And that applies in Saskatchewan too.
Yes. Are the Q&A, well, okay, Maddie's going to answer the technical question there.
I don't understand the technology. I just roll with it.
We will be, so it just said, as a quick follow-up, we will be providing a follow-up documentation in terms of questions answered and an FAQ that came from this webinar. So all that, those questions and answers will be provided in a follow-up here, as well as posting the recording and a post-webinar survey as well. I know there was a question around, does the plan need to be, do you need to prepare your plan with a certified professional? No, but that professional, you do need someone to sign off on your application, right? And so the part of that will be the plan that they're signing off on. So you can create your plan, but the overall application, which would include that plan, needs to be signed off on the professional assessment form. Okay. Not seeing any other specific questions in regards to rotational grazing. One mentorship is a part of that as well. I know there's a lot of, I don't want to dive into it because mentorship is not really part of this program. We are looking into it a little bit, but there are other mentorship programs and entities offering mentorship programs when it comes to rotational grazing. We are going to be trying to find mentorships, mentors and long-term guys that have been, and farmers that have been doing rotational grazing for a long time, and other things to help mentor other PWCP applicants. So, but there are MFGA mentors and other entities like that will be able to help out in the province, like I said. So. Okay. One more question here. So the maximum you can receive over 2 years is 75,000. Oh, somebody answered it already. Jeez, you guys.
That was me. Sorry, I was typing that. So yeah, the question was
Perfect. Okay.
75,000 over the entire length of the program. And yes, the cap or the maximum amount that a producer can receive back is $75,000 through all on-farm climate action fund programs. So that includes the Prairie Watersheds Climate Program, as well as some other programs that are available. So it's important that producers are aware.
For rotational grazing applications, is the grazing plan an requirement in both Manitoba and Saskatchewan? Yes. Is the plan a separate document from the application? Yes. You'll work with your delivery agent to attach the grazing plan as part of that. Is perimeter fencing approved to support cross fencing? Perimeter fencing, and I'll just go back. Perimeter fencing is eligible as long as it's part of the plan. Part of the rotational grazing plan. If it's not part of the rotational grazing plan, it is not. If you're just doing perimeter fencing to do perimeter fencing on your property, no. If it's part of the rotational grazing plan, like you said, to support cross fencing, that is eligible. And Lynn, I think I answered that correctly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good. I think you did.
Okay. Let's move on to nitrogen management.
There's still a couple here about improving pasture composition. Yeah, should we get to, okay, so are native legume species eligible for improving pasture composition funding? Are there any restrictions in terms of that funding on native pastures? Do you want to tackle that one, Dan?
I can tackle the second half of that. There's no other than the restriction of $75,000. Obviously, there's a restriction there in terms of funding on native pastures. I'm not knowledgeable enough on the native legume side to speak to that. Maybe you can, Lynn.
The program is pretty specific to creating low methane pastures. So specifically alfalfa and sainfoin are what are named within the program. Then that being said, certainly you would be working hopefully with an agronomist, agrologist, or certified crop advisor that is well-versed in native prairies and native pastures to give you the best recommendation for your pasture. Can newly seeded land be covered by the improving pasture composition portion of the PWCP? And that one to me is a no, because you're improving pasture composition. So it's improving an existing pasture, not necessarily for seeding new pasture. It's also not for pasture rejuvenation. Like if you've totally worked up your pasture and you're starting over again from scratch, it's strictly just to try to knife in some alfalfa or sandpoint to bring that pasture back and improve the composition that way. What if one has already received some cost shared back for this? For example, if they've applied to the Ducks Unlimited program, is it still eligible for the improving pasture part? I'm not fully aware of what Ducks Unlimited has for programming, so I can't really speak to that.
Yeah, me neither in terms of that. But we'll get you an answer. Okay, let's move on to nitrogen management, because I think that there's obviously lots of conversation around nitrogen management, and we'll get back to some of these questions if we have time at the end. I'll toss it over to you, Lynn.
Nitrogen management, and you gave me the slide with the tiny font, and I don't have my glasses on.
I thought I got it bigger.
It's fine. It's just because I don't have my glasses on today. So one of the three eligible BMP categories under the Prairie Watersheds Climate Program is nitrogen management, as well as the rotational grazing and cover cropping. So we're just going to talk a little bit about nitrogen management activities and what are eligible under the Prairie Watersheds Climate Program currently. So the use of nitrification and Urease inhibitors are an eligible project as long as you're using an approved inhibitor, and that's 85% of the cost of the inhibitors up to a maximum again of that $75,000, which again is that overarching cap of all on-farm climate action fund programming. There are other programs available that are also funding very much the same thing. So it's important that producers and agronomists are aware that there's both of those programs out there. So that $75,000 cap is between both programs. Agronomic support for nitrogen management plans is also an eligible BMP practice, up to 50% of the total cost to a maximum of $10,000. Soil testing, that's part of your nitrogen management plan, 85% of the total cost up to a maximum of $2,500. And soil mapping is 50% of the total cost up to a maximum of $10,000. And again, the important piece with these nitrogen management activities, in particular for soil testing and soil mapping, is that it is part of your nitrogen management planning, and you're demonstrating how it's helping you with your nitrogen management practices on your farm. Go to the next slide, Dan.
You betcha.
Thank you. Okay, and then we have got upgrading seeder equipment to allow for banding, side dressing, and injection of fertilizer. Again, this falls into it has to be an improved practice over what was being done previously. They have to be able to demonstrate how this is an improvement in terms of nitrogen management moving forward. And that is $200 per foot of the seeding equipment up to a maximum of $30,000. So that's based on the length of the equipment. So if they're going from single shoot to double shoot or something like that, then that might be an eligible project that they could apply for. Adding legumes into your crop rotation is another eligible BMP under the nitrogen management category. That's up to $35 per acre for establishment on a 1-year contract. If they decide producer is going to apply as a 2-year project, then they could receive up to $70 per acre. But that is based on an annual verification process, and it would be paid annually. So even though it's a 2-year contract, they would still have to verify that project with photos in particular for that one, showing that they had implemented the project each year, and then the payment would be issued. So it would actually be 2 years of $35 per acre payments that they could possibly be receiving for those 2 years if they applied as a 2-year project. Then we have some that are on a case-by-case basis that will be going forward to our steering committee, our program committee, to determine whether or not they would be eligible projects or not. And those include upgrading manure injection and incorporation equipment, split application of fertilizer to improve nitrogen use, and offsetting the higher cost of synthetic fertilizer substitutes. And some examples were manure, compost, and digestates. But again, those three are all on a case-by-case basis. So those would need to go to our panel to be reviewed before they were approved.
Thanks, Lynn. Yeah, the main reason behind on a case-by-case basis was at the time of developing the programming, the delivery agents and the steering committee and others just weren't sure how much intake they would be. We were very certain, or quite certain, on a lot of things. But there were certain things we didn't want to cross off the list and say no. We just wanted to see what appetite there was out there for those things. So if you have something that is of interest to you, that says on a case-by-case basis on here, take it to your delivery agent to discuss and see where it might fit in budget-wise and approval-wise. So, but otherwise, we didn't want to cross it off the list just for the sake of crossing it off the list. So there's quite a few questions here about the list and what are the products, and I'll try to summarize this as best I can and as clear as I can. Canola Council has a list. It's a great list. They've done a lot of work and research behind their list, which is great, and we will use that as a standard. That does not mean that your product or a product is not eligible. If it is a nitrification or Urease inhibitor, and it is not on that list, but it has the same active ingredients, it's not a brand name, stuff like that, take it to your delivery agent. In the end, we want to make sure, from AFC's perspective, the nitrification and Urease inhibitors are eligible. We want to make sure that the efficacy is appropriate. We want to use the expertise that the Canola Council has provided on their list in terms of active ingredients and the efficacy of those. And their list is live as well, and our list will be live in terms of adding products to it. The key is that you're bringing that product with your application with a recommendation from a professional that says that this product has similar active ingredients, or the same active ingredients at this rate will provide efficacy that is appropriate and should work on that land. So the list is the best way I can put it is the list is live and will be managed in terms of what products come across the table for approval. But it has to be a nitrification inhibitor or a Urease inhibitor for us to consider it. Lynn, if you want to add, I think I answered that pretty clear, but I don't know if Lynn, you want to add to that. We want to be open and not closed as to what products are out there. We've fielded, as you can all imagine, we have fielded hundreds of questions from providers and retailers around their product and whether it's active or not, or whether it's eligible. Where we are right now is we're not saying no to anything. If it's not on that list, we just need to look at it, and it needs to be come along with a recommendation from a professional in your application. Does that sound? I think that.
Yep, yeah, absolutely, and you nailed it. Yes.
Okay.
So can a landowner of agricultural land that only farms part-time or less apply to the program in either province? Answer to that is yes, you can apply as long as you are actively farming and control some land. In Saskatchewan, if the land is in Saskatchewan, then you would apply in Saskatchewan. If the land is in Manitoba, you would apply in Manitoba.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
What types of soil tests will be eligible? Only basic NPK, or would the less conventional tests be eligible as well? Do you want to take that one down?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is we don't have a list of uneligible or ineligible soil tests. Any test within reason is a good test, right? And to get some understanding of your property. Again, recommended by in your application by a professional in terms of what test, working with your watershed district to figure out what the best tests are for your property. We do not have a specific list that says no, that soil test is not eligible.
And as long as it includes nitrogen.
If it's part of the nitrogen program, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How do you know what the producer had previously for seeding equipment? In that case, we would have before and after photos of the producer, what they had previously, and then a photo of what they have now.
Here's a great question. So what does a 2-year look like? And so I'm confused by what this means, annual versus perennial. So yes, we are currently, we've got a few questions about this one. We are currently working on a clarification for this as to what, you know, if you put a perennial in the first year and it comes up the second year, am I getting paid for the second year and what am I getting paid for? We are working through some clarification on that in terms of what it would be eligible in that second year in terms of management of that perennial in the second year, because there is extremely high beneficial ecological environmental benefits to having that covered, that perennial for the second year. And we understand that. It's just what is the eligible expenses there. So something we need to just get a little more clarity on. We're working on that quite quickly here to ensure that. Otherwise, you're putting into the annual, you're terminating it, and then you're putting it in again the second year, right? So you're committing to doing it for 2 years as part of that contract, as part of the annuals.
I see we've got a few questions in regards to the nitrification and Urease inhibitors, whether they can be used independently of each other. Would that still be eligible, or would a person need to be using them both together?
So the recommendation from AAFC is that they are used together, and we are strongly recommending that they are used together for reasons that AAFC has provided in terms of emissions that either one on its own produces. And we'll be looking for professional assessments that say why to only use one or the other, right? Again, working with the delivery agents, working with the professional agrologists and CCAs around why you would only want to use one versus both. But we are strongly recommending that both products are used at either mixed on the farm or they come mixed either way. But we are strongly recommending, as AAFC is, that they are used together.
Under the nitrogen management BMP, what are we considering a legume? Is that alfalfa for cattle feed? That potentially is one legume, but there's also peas, lentils.
Yep. Also, and then the
Any
legume,
legume.
again, we don't have and we were not provided a legume list, right? AFC, we asked on several occasions if there is a legume specific list, and there isn't. You know, some are obviously better at nitrification than other. And again, the professional CCA or agrologist recommending a certain legume for your land is appropriate, and making sure that that is what is put on your property.
Yeah. So annual pulse crops can be your legumes. Somebody was asking if it has to be an annual or perennial. It can be an annual or a perennial, depending on how you're incorporating it into your rotation. And
we'll talk about cash crops when it comes to cover cropping, because it's a no-no when it comes to cover cropping in terms of harvesting for as a cash crop the next year. The legumes for nitrogen management don't have that same restriction. It can be a cash crop or a feed or what have you under the nitrogen management programming.
And here's a great question about the new practice. So clarification around new practices. What constitutes a new practice? For example, if someone used a nitrification inhibitor 5 years ago, but has not since, would readopting it now be considered an eligible practice? Is that new enough?
It's a good question. Not one, I think it's on a case-by-case basis. I don't think we haven't specifically put parameters as to what a new practice means. Someone who hasn't done something for quite a few years now and is bringing it back, yeah, we consider that a new practice, because a lot has changed probably since the last time they've done it as well, right? And so we will take that from an application perspective and take that on a case by case, and the delivery agents will if they have questions about that or any concerns about an application that would be that. So go ahead, apply, and we will review and determine from there.
And then here's another one that I've had asked of me several times is, does variable rate and sectional control equipment for seeding equipment qualify? And the answer to that is no. It's strictly just for the equipment that allows for banding, side dressing, and injection. So the variable rate sectional controls, those are not eligible.
that is definitely an area of, when I say it's not everything for everyone, that is definitely an area where that is not included, and we've received that question a few times in terms of variable rate equipment.
And then another one that I've had asked a few times is, what about humic acid based products? And unfortunately, that is not currently eligible under the nitrogen management part of the PWCP. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll come back to some more questions. I think we should dive into cover cropping, and and we have more time, we'll get back into the other questions here. There was a really good one in terms of that I saw. Might have already been answered.
There's so many questions. It's great to see all the questions.
Awesome.
So thank you for that. Yes.
Yeah. The one question was, who's monitoring that 75,000, and can a landowner call in to see where they're at? The short answer to that is yes, absolutely. You call your watershed district, your delivery agent, to see where you're at. But we have a database system that is monitoring and approving all applications and collecting all that information. So, and that database system does track how much funding has been provided to each landowner. So that information will be available for approved projects to see how much they've been approved for. Okay. Oh, some great questions. Is planting an annual legume crop funding available for a year of establishment land location specific? Yeah, you're establishing the legumes in a specific, you will be putting the land down that you're doing your project on in your application, and it can be the same land in year 2 as a perennial. It doesn't have to be new in year 2, just like cover cropping. It doesn't have to be new in year 2. Okay, man, great questions. Let's quickly talk about cover cropping. So cover cropping is the same across both provinces in terms of the eligibility, up to $35 an acre to a maximum of $75,000, the same limits as the other programs. But there is 2 main criteria when it comes to cover cropping. One, the cover crop cannot be harvested in the next growing season intended for market. I talked about the difference between that and nitrogen management program where they can be a cash crop, the legumes, but it's specifically to the cover cropping. It cannot be harvested in the next growing season and intended for market. The cover crop cannot be harvested or grazed, leaving less than 6 inches of growth over the winter. We will not be out there with a ruler making sure that it's not been done, but you are testing that you are following all the eligibility requirements for cover cropping in your application and your agreement. So please be fully aware of those 2 criteria when it comes to cover cropping in terms of cash crop and harvesting, as well as leaving less than 6 inches of growth over the winter. The intent of the program is to leave that growth over the winter for the soil health. Agronomic planning with support of agronomist, certified crop advisor. There's cost availability or funding available for that as well. And their recommendation includes the seeding of regionally approved cover crops. We obviously got a lot of question of, can this cover crop or this cover crop, or is this a cover crop? If it's a regionally approved cover crop, one that a professional has put in their form and approved as a recommendation to your specific application, then it will be considered. Fall planted cover crops as well as spring planted cover crops underseeded with the main crop or intercropping, and full season annual and or perennial cover crops in rotation are all eligible under these cover cropping activities. So cover cropping is probably one of the more fairly straightforward BMPs that we have offering, but there's still definitely questions when it comes to cover cropping. I see we still have quite a bit of questions when it comes to nitrogen management. I'm just going to see if we have any questions about cover cropping. And when it comes to the cover cropping up to the $35 an acre, you will be providing invoices for your seed, as well as your planting costs, and the total of those project costs would be the 85% would be derived from that total project cost of the seed plus the planting. and then your in-kind contribution of 15%. So we'll have each delivery agent will have some examples of how that's calculated, but it's the 85% of the total project cost, which is the seed and the seeding or the planting costs.
There is a cover crop question. Someone is asking, does sorghum or cover crops for fall winter grazing qualify?
Sorry, ask that one again, Lynn.
Does sorghum or cover crops for fall winter grazing qualify?
I don't know what sorghum is.
Well, it's just a crop. We'll just leave that part out. It's a crop. So just do cover crops that are going to be used for fall and winter grazing qualify? And really the answer to that question is there needs to be that 6 inches of growth going into the winter. So if you were going to graze it early enough in the fall and take the cattle off of it, so there was time for that 6 inches to come back, then that would be eligible as a cover crop application for sure. But that 6 inches is really the magic number, because the goal of cover cropping is always to ensure that there's the ground cover there. So in order to ensure that ground cover, there's the 6 inch rule.
Are cover crop seed mixtures eligible? Yes. Yes, they are. And it can be as simple as one species, or it can be as many species in a mix as you like. Again, if you buy a $60 per acre mix of seed, the max here is that $35 per acre. So we tried to find that middle between the more expensive seed mixes and the more basic one seed planting. You can use, and you've probably seen these in the fact sheets, you can use bin run seed from your property of your own. That would be considered an in-kind contribution, and then the planting would then become part of your planting costs, would be your eligible costs of reimbursement. But this bin run seed would be the in-kind contribution.
As long as the cover crop is not intended for market purposes.
That too, yes. And it's again signed off by and recommended by a professional.
So here's a question. If a legume is planted for seed production in year 1, so this is going back to the nitrogen management BMP. If a legume is planted for seed production in year 1, but the stand is not sufficient due to winter kill, would it be eligible in year 2 for adding the legume to rotation?
I think the short answer on that is yes.
That's kind of a tricky one.
It's a tricky one. We'll get back to you on that one, but I if something happens where, I mean, you've planted, we're paying for you to plant. Whether it is insufficient due to winter kill is, we are paying for the BMP, for the attempt, the seed and the planting, right? And verifying that you've done exactly that in terms of seeding and planting. Whether the winter kill and stuff like that, I will get back to you on that, but I shouldn't prohibit the second year of programming. What about melted urea? I think we've answered that one before, Lynn, haven't we?
I don't recall.
Okay. We will get an answer on that one.
What additional information do you require with the photograph? Is a good question. I can speak to Saskatchewan. We actually have found an app that we are encouraging our staff to use if they're taking photos, that actually includes the location. But essentially we want to have the location and the date, so that we can verify that that is the field that the producer is applying for, and to ensure that the verification in particular for cover crops in the fall is being done in a timely manner. So we need the date and the location, but there are some apps out there that actually will imprint that right onto the photo, which is super, super cool. And I am not a techie, but some of those apps are really great. So if you have questions specific to those in Saskatchewan, talk to one of our staff members that are in your area, or if you're in Manitoba, I'm sure your watershed districts also could point you in the right direction too.
Agreed. Here's a process question. Are the watersheds reviewing applications to ensure they are complete, then forwarding applications to MAW for approval? Does MAW send out letter to approve project, then producer completes project and submits claim forms? you've kind of nailed the process down there. The application process lies with the delivery agents, and they decide, and the delivery agents approve the projects. When it comes to MAW, it's a checklist where we are just checking for completeness to make sure nothing's missing, to make sure that in an overall sense, it meets within the requirements of the program. But the approval, the projects that come to MAW will have that approval from the delivery agents. And because we are the signer of the flow through of the money that goes out, we need to have that one last checklist to make sure the application is complete that's been sent to us. But in terms of approval, the delivery agents will be providing that approval and submitting their approved projects to us for final check on completeness of the application. And then once that we deem it as complete, the agreement will be sent to the delivery agent to get signed by you, the producer. And again, you're working with your delivery agent on the application, on the agreement, and the like. MAW will always, and Saul will always be here to answer questions, but the large majority of your interactions when it comes to your application and your agreements and stuff like that will be with the delivery agents, which are the watershed districts in Manitoba and in Saskatchewan.
And there's a question about the before and after photos. So are some BMPs going to be exempt from having before and after photos, for example, soil testing? And yes, absolutely. Where it doesn't make sense to have before and after photos, like for soil testing, soil mapping, absolutely, there's not going to be the same requirement for before and after photos as there would be with the equipment upgrades or cover crops, those sorts of things. So it's again something that in Saskatchewan our staff can walk you through, and in Manitoba your watershed district staff could walk you through as well.
Here's a good question. Do you have a list of set rates for labor and equipment costs? I believe you do in Saskatchewan, and I believe we do in Manitoba as well.
Yep, there's a provincial custom rate guide that's available online. So that's what we would encourage producers to use for determining their in-kind costs and labor and equipment costs, for sure.
And could Sauce share the name of the app if possible for times?
Oh, I don't know if I can pronounce it properly, but it's Theodolite or something like that. Theodolite.
Theodolite.
I just typed it in their answer so they can see it. It's THEODLITE is the one of the ones that we're using. There's another one. That one you have to pay for. There's a free one. I can't remember off the top of my head, but again, our staff could help direct you to those two.
Here's a question. I don't know the answer to this one, Lynn, but I think I'm wondering if you might do equipment costs need to be inquired prior to applying, or can a producer wait till after approval to start inquiring costs to modify equipment for side banding? Yeah, I think we'll have to get back to you on that one.
You have to verify that you've completed the project in order to receive payment. So you would have to do it ahead of time.
Okay.
Oh, somebody said another good app to use is Context Cam.
There you go.
The photos. Thank you. See, I knew that.
Thanks, Graham.
There's people out there that know way more about technology than I do. That is for sure. I appreciate that so much, Graham. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, is planting an annual legume crop funding available for year of establishment land location specific, or the whole farm operation specific? Meaning, do you have to be a new grower? I'm not sure I'm understanding that question properly, but if I am, it needs to be on new acres or an expansion on existing acres if it's a practice that you've already been doing. So if you've not been doing legumes in your crop rotation in the past at all, then it would be whatever land locations that you're incorporating it into the rotation on would be the ones that you could apply for. If you've been doing it in the past and it's an existing practice, but say you were only doing it on half of your 2,000 acre farm, and you've only been doing it on 1,000 acres, and now you're decided that you're going to start doing it on the other 1,000, then you could apply for that other 1,000 as a new, as an expansion of new acres. I hope I answered that right. I'm not sure I was reading that properly.
I think you did, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If the cover crop was planted this past spring, but due to lack of rain, the cover crop did not grow to 6 inches in the growth season, will there be exceptions made and funding still be provided? Get some clarity on that one. We obviously want to be reasonable, especially on projects that have been done here between February 7th and now in terms of being done. So we'll get a clear answer on that for you.
Should we carry on and then go through the rest maybe at the end?
Yeah, there's sure. Or
are we at the end? Oh, we're at the end.
end.
I was having so much fun answering questions. I lost where we were. Okay, so here's a Manitoba question, Dan. Are the GROW program and this program stackable?
Short answer is no, but I'll get some clarity on that as well. But I believe the short answer, we're again working with all the entities throughout Manitoba and all the different projects, ensuring that but I'll get an answer on the stack. Well, it's not coming to my mind right now.
There's a question about the total funding allocation. If Manitoba's share of the funding is 10 million, does each BMP category receive 1/3 or 3.33 million? So
the answer to that is no. When AFC put out the program, they had a specific allocation to each BMP in mind. And I believe at the start it was 55% nitrogen management, 35% rotation, or 35% cover cropping, and 10% rotational grazing. We have flexibility in that range, but the short answer is no. It's not an even split between all three BMPs. There's definitely a higher allocation towards nitrogen management within this program.
And then with adding legumes to crop rotation, is there any requirement for how long the land has been in annual crop production before being eligible for receiving payment for seeding a legume? For example, could a producer break a pasture, then seed lentils and receive payment for establishing a legume?
I feel like you've had that question before, Lynn.
I've had that question before. So if you're breaking the pasture for the purposes of putting it into crop rotation, it could be something that you could apply for. If you're just breaking the pasture to rejuvenate the pasture and you're just going to have it out for a year and then reseed it or something, then I don't think that that's necessarily considered a crop rotation. So it would depend on exactly what your plans are. So really that's one of those questions where I would end up answering it with more questions, unfortunately. So yeah, I apologize for not giving clarity on that.
I'm not even going to attempt to answer the VR irrigation tech implementation question.
I actually have had that asked of me before, using irrigation equipment as their means of nitrogen management and applying their fertilizer. And it's very specific in the program how the wording is on the equipment. So it's equipment upgrades that are specific to banding, injection, and side dressing. Yeah, side banding. So in the case of applying using your irrigation equipment, that's a foliar application. And the foliar application falls into the case by case. If it's a split application, then that would be considered as a case by case basis one. So you would want to talk to your delivery agent about that.
Good question here, but what is the order of operations for nitrogen management program, or will it be covered in the application? Example, does an agrologist need to be consulted prior to the soil testing or only once the data is available? I think the common practice is to have that agrologist review the soil testing, right, and provide recommendations based on that soil testing and all the data you want your agrologist or whoever's reviewing and recommending to have all the information available to them. So I think that's I think that would be the best answer for that. Can I seed oats with alfalfa underseeded? Would that qualify or would not be able to harvest those crops until the second year? It's a very specific question. I think unless Lynn, you have an answer to that, we'll have to get back to you on that one.
Yes, that one's another one that I would answer with more questions. What are your plans for the alfalfa? Are you selling it? Is it for market? Is this a nitrogen management or is this cover crops? Many questions. So does seeding a legume, I'll ask this one, does seeding a legume in rotation for the first time on a specific field qualify if a grower has grown it on other fields prior?
Yeah, it's you are expanding your practice, right? You are seeding, yeah, you are putting it on new acres, which is the gist of the program. You're either doing a brand new for your operation, or you're expanding what you have done in the past on new acres.
Exactly. Yes. Somebody's asking if buying a manure spreader qualifies. No, it does not. The manure management one is specific to injection, and that's a case-by-case one too. Is there a contact list for delivery agents? Absolutely. On the Manitoba Association of Watersheds website that was posted earlier, they have contact list for all of the watershed districts, and then they also have the link for the Saskatchewan Association of Watersheds website. And I'll just give a quick little plug to our website here. Because on our website, saskwatersheds.ca, we actually have a section where you can type in your RM and find your contact person from our organization by RM. So we tried to make it as simple as possible for you to connect with your person for your area. Shameless plug there, Dan, sorry.
It's fine. You've earned it today.
I spent a lot of time making that RM database, so I'm like, I hope everybody uses it.
So yeah. Please clarify if one producer is one applicant, and what if a corporation is more than one producer? So if a corporation is applying, the corporation is the applicant. It's whoever is in title of the land, right? If you own the land or certain pieces of land that you want to do the project on, you are applying. If you and your significant other, for example, own different pieces of land, they need to apply as an applicant together. So if it's all about the applicant is who is the rightful owner of the land, or renter of the land, if you will. And so you could actually obviously apply 2 or 3 times because you have your land in different names and corporations and stuff like that. But this most straightforward way and the best way, because it is taxable income, is to the owner of the property is the one getting paid.
And it comes down to business number too, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So the business number is part of the application. So it's important to make sure that your invoices, receipts, proof of payment, all of those things are matching up to the name that's associated with your business number.
What's we got here? I might need more clarification around how cover cropping or legumes on rotation can be considered new practice that are eligible for incentive in the second year. Feel free to send us a specific question or a specific example of that, and we can provide you with as much information as we can. So Graham wrote, I will ask the question to help answer the soil test. If the soil test does not include a bulk density package and the report does not have an SOC section, does it still qualify?
That's a great question, Graham. Soil testing is not my area of expertise. So I have no idea. We would have to get back to you on that. If you want to fire off one of us an email after, then we can look into that further. But essentially with soil testing, it needs to be part of the nitrogen management plan, and it needs to demonstrate that they are testing for nitrogen. So I apologize. That's not my area of expertise at all. So while we're in our not area of expertise, let's take some more fertilizer questions. If a producer uses Super U fertilizer, which has a stabilizer built in, what would he get paid on? The difference on the cost of urea question.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, Super U is listed on the list of
Yeah.
eligible products.
Yep.
So yeah, if you have questions specific to what exactly the payment would look like, or the 85%, I'd say talk to your delivery agent and work with them on that.
Good question here. Can you clarify if rotational grazing BMPs are available on Crown land and I lost it there, and community pastures? Crown land for sure. Like I said, as long as it does not, long as this funding and the project that you're doing does not go against or nullify any existing agreements you have in conjunction with your Crown land. I believe there's an entity in Saskatchewan, Lynn, that you have to check with, and checking with your renter or whoever you have the agreement with is obviously the logical first step, right? Is to make sure you're not offside on anything you're planning on doing, and making sure that whatever agreements you have signed with any other entities, including Crown land, is okay. So making that connection first before applying would be a really good thing to do. Community pastures, we are working on some language around community pastures, and in terms of which entity can apply, there are some examples from out east that we're working on as well in terms of community pastures and what they've done. So we'll have some clarity on that around community pastures.
Yeah,
Lynn,
so,
yeah, go ahead.
Yes, because I know some things about this part. So for Crown land, you need to consult in Saskatchewan. It's important that you consult with your Ministry of Agriculture land agrologist, and have them aware of the project that you're doing on any Crown land. Plus side of that is they're a land agrologist, so maybe they'll be willing to sign off on the project for you. Who knows? It's worth the ask. And then also grazing co-ops. So some of our provincial pastures have transitioned over into grazing cooperatives, and unfortunately those grazing co-ops are not eligible to apply for funding. My understanding is that part of that stems back to some of the funding to establish those pastures was done federally through the PFRA and other programs, so they are not eligible to apply for the program. But if you do have a Crown lease as an individual or as a separate corporation that is not a grazing co-op, then you can consult your land agrologist and have their approval on the project as part of your application. I was a land agrologist for one whole year, Dan. I'm glad that came in handy.
Have you addressed a landlord and renter, especially if the agreement is verbal, who makes the application? I see Maddie's typing an answer, but Linda, any thoughts on that one?
Sorry, I didn't catch all that one.
How have you addressed a landlord?
Landlord and renter,
especially if the agreement is verbal?
So the important piece with landlord and renter, first of all, is that we can't have two people applying for the same project on the same piece of land. So if the renter is the person who is farming the land and paying for the inputs, then the invoices should technically be in their name. So they should be applying under their business number, because the application and the name on the invoices, receipts, proof of payment all needs to be the same name. If it's a crop share situation where the landlord is paying for everything and then the renter is doing the work, then, you know, potentially the landlord would be applying, but it's important that we're making sure that we're not applying for the same project on the same piece of land.
Great answer.
Yeah. And then the professional agronomists, do professional agronomists or professional agrologists or agronomists have to take any 4R training, or is their designation sufficient? And in the case of the PWCP, it is recommended that you take the 4R training, but it is not required under the program. And again, I'll fall back to the statement of ensuring that you're working within your area and scope of practice if you are a professional agrologist.
Great.
Is the cost of a no-till drill part of the cost for seeding equipment in pasture land? No. The improving pasture composition piece, that $35 an acre, is very specific to the seed costs. So purchasing a drill would not be covered as part of that project.
But I think I'm hoping not over speaking, but I think as part of their in-kind contribution, if they're, in terms of their implementation and planting of the legume, it can be as part of the in-kind contribution or the cash contribution.
Yeah, the custom rate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not the specific equipment though. I don't.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So the question around community pastures there, I know Lynn had a very specific example there in Saskatchewan. I know we are across the whole program looking at some of the things they've done out east when it comes to community pastures and seeing if that is eligible here. I think Lynn has a very specific example in Saskatchewan where it's not eligible. So that I think the answer is probably a yes and no. We're seeing what we can do with community pastures at this time. But in terms, I think Lynn, you had a very specific example, right?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. Nope, you don't need an environmental farm plan. Where does one get recognized for our training? You can actually get it online. It's something that SAW has put all of our staff through, and it's online. And actually, in Saskatchewan, it was free. I don't know. You can select by province. In Saskatchewan, it was free. So we are coming up on 4 o'clock. This has been, I just want to say this has been incredible. Thank you all so much we still got almost 200 people on the line asking questions and being part of this discussion. Sessions like this are incredibly important for us because, as much outreach as we have in talking to producers and talking to our delivery agents, you never know all the answers and all the questions that are out there. So the questions that you guys have provided today have been fantastic. We really, really appreciate it. We are going to answer all your questions after the fact here as we close up. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you, Lynn, for your great work today in answering questions. Thank you to Duncan for the hosting. Go to the MAW webpage, go to the SAW webpage. There are materials there in regards to the fact sheets and some educational fact sheets around each of the BMPs that we've put together. So please don't hesitate to contact your delivery agent, your local watershed district, your local region when it comes to SAW and watershed districts, or us for that matter, and just reach out. We try to respond as quickly as we can to all of your inquiries. And apologies if there's some delay sometimes, but sometimes summer with holiday season too is tougher, but we do all of our best to make sure we're answering your questions in a timely manner. And we appreciate all of your patience. This has been especially for our delivery agent stuff, the patience has been incredible. The program has obviously been, delayed a little bit in terms of getting off the ground, but it's going to be fantastic. And we're really looking forward to delivering this for the producers in Saskatchewan and Manitoba. So appreciate all of your patience. Appreciate your questions today. I don't know, Lynn, if you want to add anything to that. Nope,
you nailed it. Thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for everybody. And a great question to end it. It just went away, but can Duncan prepare a summary for his newsletter? I like it. The MFGA newsletter next is going to have a summary of this webinar. I like it. So again, really appreciate you, everyone logging in. Have a great rest of the day. Have a great weekend. And we look forward to delivering this program right away. So thank you, everybody.